think they try to, but I am such a professional.
Big pro.
The lights of the United Center still echo in memory, a cathedral of basketball where legends carved their names. Among them stood Scottie Pippen, a forward who carried the weight of 6 championships and the respect of the entire league. For years, fans labeled him as the shadow of Michael Jordan, but those who truly watched the game knew Pippen was far more than a sidekick. He was the heartbeat of the Bulls dynasty, a player who could guard all 5 positions, create plays, and step into the spotlight when the pressure burned hottest. Pippen's career was not only defined by trophies, but also by the players he measured himself against and admired most. They were the men who forced him to sharpen his skills, who tested his limits, and who ultimately helped shape his own legend. If you asked Pippen to name the 5 basketball players he valued above all, the list would reveal both his rivals and his inspirations. And so, the journey begins with the one name he could never ignore, the figure who stood beside him in triumph and pushed him beyond his limits, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was more than just a teammate to Scottie Pippen, he was the ultimate standard. From the moment Pippen joined the Bulls in 1987, Jordan's relentless drive set the tone for everything that followed. Practices were battles, games were tests, and the expectations were sky-high. Pippen once admitted that no one pushed him harder than Jordan. The 6'6" guard demanded perfection, and in that crucible, Pippen's game transformed. Jordan's greatness was obvious to the world, the breathtaking dunks, the clutch shots, the 6 finals MVPs. But for Pippen, what stood out most was Jordan's intensity every single day. There was no easing into the season, no taking nights off. If Jordan scored over 40 points, Pippen knew he had to bring his best defense, his smartest decisions, just to keep the Bulls balanced. The partnership was often described as one of dominance and shadow, but inside the locker room, it was about mutual respect. Jordan showed Pippen that greatness is not just talent, but relentless will. And while the media often portrayed tension, Pippen has repeatedly acknowledged that without Jordan, he might never have reached the Hall of Fame. Their connection was forged in sweat and championships, a bond that defined basketball's golden era. But Pippen's admiration did not stop with Jordan. Beyond Chicago, he looked to a different kind of genius, a player whose vision of the game changed everything, the one they called magic. When Scottie Pippen looked beyond Chicago, one of the first names that came to mind was Earvin "Magic" Johnson. To Pippen, Magic represented the pure joy of basketball, a 6'9" point guard who played the game with imagination and flair. Long before they ever faced each other, Pippen had studied the way Magic commanded the floor. His passes cut through defenses like poetry in motion, his leadership carried the Lakers to 5 championships, and his charisma made the sport larger than life. The defining moment came in the 1991 NBA Finals. The Bulls were chasing their first title, and Pippen was tasked with guarding Magic himself. It was a challenge that tested his pride and his stamina. By stepping into that role, Pippen proved he was more than Jordan's sidekick. He was a defensive anchor capable of slowing the greatest playmaker of his generation. That series not only brought Chicago its first championship, it cemented Pippen's admiration for Magic. He often spoke about how Magic's versatility opened doors for players like him, tall forwards who could handle the ball, initiate offense, and defend across positions. For Pippen, Magic was both a rival and a teacher from afar, showing what it meant to redefine a position. From Magic's artistry, Pippen's journey turned toward another figure of dominance, a man whose footwork and presence in the paint made him nearly unstoppable, Hakeem Olajuwon. Among all the greats Scottie Pippen encountered, Hakeem Olajuwon stood out as the perfect blend of grace and power. Known as the Dream, Olajuwon was a 7-footer with the footwork of a guard and the instincts of a seasoned champion. Pippen often recalled how difficult it was to face him during the Houston Rockets' dominant years, when Olajuwon's spin moves and unstoppable jump hooks left defenders helpless. In 1999, Pippen briefly joined forces with Olajuwon in Houston. Though the partnership did not deliver the success many hoped for, Pippen came away with even greater respect for the Nigerian center. He witnessed up close the discipline and humility that defined Olajuwon's career. Even in practice, Hakeem's attention to detail, his positioning, his timing, his relentless conditioning left a lasting impression on Pippen. What set Olajuwon apart, in Pippen's eyes, was not just his scoring, but his ability to dominate both ends of the floor. Few centers could protect the rim and still glide effortlessly on offense. For Pippen, who prided himself on versatility, Olajuwon represented the ideal, a player who could impact the game in every possible way. It was a bond of admiration that extended beyond the court. Pippen often described Hakeem as one of the most respectful and dignified opponents he ever faced. And when they became teammates, that respect only deepened. From Olajuwon's quiet dominance, Pippen's journey of respect shifted back to a familiar rival turned unlikely ally Dennis Rodman, a man whose energy and rebounding turned battles into legends. For years, Dennis Rodman was the face of frustration for Scottie Pippen and the Chicago Bulls. As a cornerstone of the Detroit Bad Boys Pistons, Rodman thrived on chaos, crashing the boards, diving into bodies, and making life miserable for every opponent. Pippen felt that intensity firsthand in the late 80s and early 90s, when every playoff series between Chicago and Detroit seemed like a war of attrition. The battles were personal, and Pippen once admitted that few players ever got under his skin the way Rodman did. Yet basketball has a way of flipping the script. When Rodman arrived in Chicago in 1995, Pippen's perspective shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the same energy that once tormented him was now working in his favor. He witnessed the dedication behind the spectacle, how Rodman studied angles of rebounding, how he sacrificed offense to anchor the defense, and how his relentlessness gave Chicago an edge that no other team could match. What impressed Pippen most was Rodman's willingness to embrace his role. While others chased scoring titles or spotlight moments, Rodman took pride in the dirty work. To Pippen, that kind of selflessness was a rare gift, one that helped the Bulls secure 3 more championships. The transformation from bitter enemy to respected ally became one of the defining chapters in Pippen's journey. Rodman showed him that greatness could come in unexpected forms, that even the fiercest rival could become a brother in pursuit of victory. And as Pippen reflected on respect, he turned his eyes to another powerhouse, an opponent whose strength and consistency tested him on the game's biggest stage, Karl Malone. Karl Malone was a rival Scottie Pippen could never overlook. Known as the mailman, Malone delivered night after night with relentless consistency. Standing strong at 6'9", he embodied the physicality and endurance of the Utah Jazz, carrying them into back-to-back finals against the Bulls in 1997 and 1998. For Pippen, facing Malone was more than a matchup, it was a test of willpower. Every possession against him demanded full focus. Malone's mid-range jumper was nearly automatic, his strength in the post unmatched, and his stamina seemed endless. Pippen often spoke about how Malone never backed down, no matter how grueling the series became. In those finals, Pippen admired the way Malone shouldered the weight of an entire franchise, much like Pippen himself had done at times when Jordan briefly stepped away from the game. Though the Bulls ultimately triumphed in both championships, Pippen never dismissed Malone's greatness. He respected how the forward combined raw power with a relentless work ethic, year after year. Malone's ability to stay among the league's elite well into his late 30s symbolized a standard of professionalism that Pippen valued deeply. Their battles were fierce, filled with intensity and drama, but underneath it all lay genuine respect. Pippen knew that without Malone's challenge, the Bulls' dynasty would not have been sharpened to its finest edge. With Malone closing the list, Pippen's reflections came full circle: 5 players who defined his journey, shaping him not only as a champion but as a man who learned to admire greatness in all its forms.